a palace between two worlds. Rising above the meeting point of Europe and Asia stands one of history's most extraordinary royal complexes. Topkapi Palace, overlooking the Bosphorus, the Golden Horn, and the Sea of Marmara. Topkapi Palace was not designed to impress with a single monumental facade. Instead, it was built as a world within walls, a place of power, secrecy, ceremony, and absolute authority. For nearly 4 centuries, Topkapi Palace served as the political and administrative heart of the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful states the world has ever known. To understand Topkapi Palace is to understand how the Ottomans ruled not through spectacle alone, but through control, discipline, and carefully guarded distance. In 1453, a single event changed world history. Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Ottomans under Sultan Mehmed II, later known as Mehmed the Conqueror. With the city now under Ottoman rule, a new imperial capital was born, Istanbul. Mehmed II immediately began reshaping the city to reflect Ottoman authority. At the center of this transformation would stand a new palace, one that symbolized conquest, sovereignty, and divine legitimacy. Construction of Topkapi Palace began in the 1460s, shortly after the conquest of Constantinople. Unlike European palaces built as single, massive structures, Topkapi was designed as a series of courtyards, pavilions, and gardens. This design reflected Ottoman values: separation of power, controlled access, hierarchy, and privacy. The palace was not meant to be admired from afar. It was meant to function. From its earliest days, Topkapi Palace was the seat of the Sultan's authority. Topkapi Palace was organized around 4 main courtyards, each more restricted than the last. The deeper one moved into the palace, the closer one came to power. The outer courtyards were accessible to officials and visitors. The inner courtyards were reserved for the Sultan, his family, and trusted servants. This spatial hierarchy reinforced the idea that power was not easily reached. Access itself was privilege. The first courtyard served as a public and administrative space. Here, soldiers, officials, and visitors entered the palace grounds. It was a transition zone between the city and imperial authority. This courtyard communicated scale rather than luxury, a reminder that the state was vast, organized, and disciplined. The second courtyard was the political heart of Topkapi Palace. Here stood the Imperial Council Chamber, where high-ranking officials met to govern the empire. The Grand Vizier and other ministers discussed military campaigns, taxation, diplomacy, and law. Although the Sultan rarely appeared in these meetings, his presence was always implied. Power did not need to be visible to be absolute. One of the most striking features of the Imperial Council Chamber was a small, screened window. From behind this screen, the Sultan could listen without being seen. This architectural detail symbolized Ottoman rule. Authority without exposure, control without familiarity. No official could ever be sure whether the Sultan was watching. Beyond the Gate of Felicity lay the third courtyard, the inner palace. This was the private domain of the Sultan. Here were the most important institutions of the empire: the imperial treasury, the sacred relics chamber. Elite palace schools access was extremely limited. Only those closest to the Sultan were allowed inside. The imperial treasury housed objects that symbolized both wealth and divine authority. Gold, jewels, ceremonial weapons, and priceless gifts filled its chambers. These treasures were not merely decorative. They represented the empire's reach from Europe to Asia, from Africa to the Middle East. Among the most famous objects is the Topkapi dagger, a symbol of imperial craftsmanship and power. One of the most significant areas of Topkapi Palace is the Chamber of Sacred Relics. Here, relics associated with the Prophet Muhammad were preserved. For the Ottoman sultans, these relics reinforced their role not only as rulers, but as caliphs, leaders of the Islamic world. Religion and governance were inseparable. Topkapi Palace was as much a spiritual center as a political one. Perhaps the most misunderstood part of Topkapi Palace is the harem. Far from being merely a private living space, The harem was a center of education, power, and influence. It housed the sultan's family, his mother, the valid sultan consorts, children and servants. The valid sultan often wielded enormous political influence, advising the sultan and shaping court politics. Behind closed doors, decisions were made that affected the fate of the empire. Life in the harem followed strict rules and hierarchy. Education was central. Women were trained in languages, religion, arts, and court etiquette. Advancement depended on intelligence, loyalty, and discipline. The harem was not chaos, it was structure. The sultan's daily life was defined by ritual and isolation. Public appearances were rare and carefully controlled. Ceremony reinforced distance. Distance reinforced authority. Unlike European monarchs who sought visibility, Ottoman sultans ruled through mystery. At its peak, the Ottoman Empire stretched across 3 continents. Topkapi Palace was the command center of this vast state. Military campaigns were planned here. Foreign ambassadors waited here. Imperial decrees were issued from within its walls. Yet the palace itself remained calm, ordered, and controlled. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Ottoman Empire began to change. European influence grew. New architectural tastes emerged. Sultans gradually moved to newer palaces along the Bosphorus, such as Dolmabahce. Topkapi Palace lost its role as the main royal residence. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the establishment of the Turkish Republic, Topkapi Palace entered a new chapter. In 1924, it was transformed into a museum. Once a place of secrecy and power, it became a place of public memory. Its courtyards open to the world. Today, Topkapi Palace is one of the most visited historic sites in Turkey. Millions of visitors walk through its courtyards, treasury, and harem each year. It stands as a symbol of Ottoman governance, a masterpiece of imperial planning, a bridge between cultures and continents. Restoration efforts continue to preserve its legacy. Topkapi Palace was never built to impress crowds. It was built to rule. Through hierarchy, secrecy, and discipline, it governed one of history's greatest empires for nearly 400 years. Today, its walls no longer guard power, but they preserve memory. Topkapi Palace reminds us that authority can be exercised not only through grandeur, but through control, not through spectacle, but through silence.